Pirates. My name is Luffy. Chapter 1. My name is Wong Luffy. Nickname. Sea King. Yes, just as you think, my nickname is only one letter different from that of the Pirate King Luffy. This is why people often tease my name. Although I drink, smoke, and have tattoos, I am a good boy. It's just that I can't change my nature of being a man who loves women. Maybe because I'm too handsome and kind, there are always many ragged ladies looking at me for help. And I, who am kind-hearted, always can't help but lend a helping hand and take them home to properly settle them. This time is the same. But why does it feel a little wrong when I wake up? At this time, Wong Luffy was squeezed in an extremely small space. He even felt that his limbs could not move freely, which was extremely uncomfortable. It felt like being kidnapped. Wong Luffy said that he was not panicked at all. After all, he had experienced this kind of thing several times. Often after waking up drunk at the party in his villa, he would find that those ragged young ladies always liked to tie his hands and feet, cover his eyes and do some strange things. This time is the same. Maybe. But just as Wong Luffy was thinking about this, he suddenly found that in the narrow space where he couldn't see his hand in front of his face, a light blue light suddenly appeared, from point to line to surface in front of him. Wong Luffy thought he had an illusion and closed his eyes immediately. But the next moment, something that made him panic appeared. Even if he closed his eyes, he could still see the slowly unfolding blue light curtain. The size of this light curtain is about the size of an Apple MacBook Gold Ultra Thin. Why does it feel like introducing Durex? Whether Wong Luffy sees it or not, it is there, not far away. It doesn't move. Wong Luffy frowned, he found that things were not simple. Could it be that some young lady was playing tricks on him? Just when Wong Luffy was at a loss, a few words suddenly appeared on the blue screen in front of him. A perfect plot strategy for One Piece. What kind of a development is this? What the hell is this? Wong Luffy was really confused at this moment. His first thought was that he was screwed, his identity as the king of the sea was known to the world. The second thought was that he was screwed, could it be that he had rescued a young lady who had a boyfriend, and now the boyfriend came to mess with him? The third thought was that there was a young lady playing a game of guessing with him, right? Unfortunately, it seemed that none of them were true. Because in the next moment, Wong Luffy felt a splitting headache. It was as if someone was holding a sledgehammer and hitting his head with 80, 80, and it hurt so much that it seemed to explode. After Wong Luffy groaned, he fainted. But it was his body in this small space that fainted, but his consciousness was still clear, and it was because of his clarity that Wong Luffy was shocked. It's over, I'm Luffy. That's right, it's the Pirate King Luffy you think of. Almost at this moment, Wong Luffy received all the memories and experiences of this body. He didn't understand why his soul was transferred to Luffy in the world of One Piece. After all, there was no other connection between them except that their names were exactly the same. However, the truth always reveals its cruelty inadvertently. Wong Luffy fell into the swimming pool and drowned when he was drunk at a pool party at his home. And the Pirate King Luffy was drowned by the seawater that penetrated in when he encountered a big whirlpool at sea and wanted to hide in a wine barrel to escape. The case is solved. The truth is that they were both drowned. Since they are both called Wong Luffy and both drowned, it is not surprising that Wong Luffy traveled to Wong Luffy's body, right? Oh my god, isn't it weird? Weird. Very weird. Wong Luffy roared in this consciousness space. After learning that he was actually dead, he was still a little bit unbelievable. Although he smoked, drank, got tattoos, and even persuaded prostitutes to become good women, he never dragged good people into trouble. He was really a good man. After receiving part of the demolition compensation from his family, he quit his job as a civil servant and lived a plain and boring life collecting rent. Except for going back to his hometown to sweep the graves of his parents during the Qingming festival, he basically never left his city. No matter where there is a disaster, he will donate money. If he meets beggars on the road, he will give money. He even often helps old ladies cross the road. How could such a good young man of the 21st century end up like this? Good people should be. Alas. King Luffy sighed deeply. Maybe this is what life is like. Maybe his soul was transmigrated this time because he did so many good deeds in his previous life. That's probably the case. As expected. Good people have good reputations. But what made him feel sorry was that Luffy in this parallel universe could no longer embark on the road to becoming a free king that he was pursuing. Reality is a ruthless thing, it does not allow you to resist. You can only accept it completely. Just like King Luffy received all of Luffy's memories, carrying the emotional memories of a young boy's pure dreams. King Luffy rarely feels this way. He never thought that he would become Luffy one day. This world of One Piece. Tisk. How to say it. When watching anime, you think it is beautiful, passionate, touching, and full of freedom. However, when you are really in this world, you will find that it is deformed, ugly, cruel, and completely unreasonable. The celestial dragons are high above. The navy is their running dogs. Slaves are treated as nothing, and human traffickers are rampant. There is no king's law and no law. The country is on the verge of being exploited and destroyed. People's lives are difficult, and the people are oppressed and can't breathe, and life and death are decided. Les Miserables is not as miserable as them. The result is that the officials force the people to rebel. Even if it is just through the few words in Luffy's memory, Luffy feels cold hands and feet in this hot summer. Hell is empty, and the devil is on earth. Compared with the world of pirates, China is like heaven. After inheriting Luffy's memory, Luffy naturally inherited his emotions and his obsession with the pursuit of the Pirate King. A real man is born in a turbulent time, how can he be depressed and live under others for a long time? There is really nothing wrong with wanting to be the Pirate King. Luffy recognized this pursuit and obsession, but his method could not be as reckless as Luffy. Of course, the most important point is that although he inherited Luffy's memory and even his combat experience, but as a weakling who grew up in a peaceful world, he does not have the ability to fight for a place with these ruthless people in the pirate world for the time being, you know. An ordinary person, very blue. Then the question is, as a time traveler, will there be no golden fingers? Probably. It's just that this golden finger makes Luffy feel a little embarrassed to talk about it. Can't develop moves. No problem, the golden finger will help you solve it. Can't practice hockey. No problem, the golden finger will help you solve it. Can't awaken the devil fruit. No problem, the golden finger will help you solve it. Everything is beautiful, but Luffy is puzzled. I didn't know it before I traveled through time, but I inherited Luffy's memory after traveling through time. No, then I traveled through time in vain, didn't I? How come such a good thing happened to me? Is it really because I am a good person? Judging from the name and introduction of this golden finger, it is probably so. This golden finger has no tasks, no wisdom, only a simple panel and a manual. Perfect plot strategy for One Piece. The gold finger is derived from the universe law based on the host's own heart. Through the plot of One Piece that Luffy himself knows, conquer important female characters in the plot. The strategy goes from heart to body, or from body to heart, and rewards are obtained according to the progress of the strategy. For example, Nami, strategy progress, 10% open reward, 30% open reward, 50% open reward, 70% open reward, 100% open reward. Before deciding on the character to be conquered, you must say, XXX, you don't want to XXX, do you? Will trigger the strategy progress, otherwise it will be considered invalid. Luffy covered his face. Why is there such a golden finger? Give me back what my heart desires. Am I that kind of person? I am not. Even if I, Luffy, am chopped to death or hammered to death, I will never compromise with my heart, no, with the evil golden finger. Bang. Just when Luffy accused the golden finger of insulting his personality, the space he was in was suddenly broken from the outside. But before Luffy could react, a large shiny steel knife chopped down on his head. At the same time, a shouting voice followed. Who are you? Looking at the fierce knife, Luffy's muscle memory immediately came to his mind, and his body moved on its own in an instant. Luffy, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, leaned back with his upper body, and the whole person was like a boneless person, with his waist and lower body forming a strange arc, and easily dodged the knife. Snap. At the same time, he supported the ground with his left palm, and his waist bounced up like a spring. With this force, the whole person also changed from sitting cross-legged to standing sideways, and swung his right hand and punched the chin of the person who swung the knife at him. like a golf swing, and the posture was slightly elegant. Bang! Boom! Kacha! This series of actions was completed in an instant. After a sound of bone cracking was heard, the man who swung the knife was blasted upwards, smashing through the cabin above his head and flying into the sky. Seeing this scene, a blue-clad big-bellied pirate and his companions standing nearby, as well as the pink-haired little boy next to him, were all stunned. Although Wong Luffy was surprised, he had inherited all of Luffy's memories. At this moment, he was Wong Luffy and Luffy. He looked at the two people, and finally stopped his gaze on the blue-clad big-bellied pirate. Wong Luffy smiled. Who am I? I am the Pirate King Luffy. Nani? After hearing what Wong Luffy said, the two pirates present suddenly widened their eyes and opened their mouths that were about to drop to the ground and exclaimed in unison. One Piece. Luffy. Sigui. Seeing their exaggerated expressions, Wong Luffy's face darkened. It was indeed a bit unbearable to experience the pirate style up close. At this time, the little boy with pink hair on the side spoke weakly. He means, he is a pirate, called Wong Luffy, right? After hearing what the pink-haired boy said, the two pirates, one fat and one thin, wiped the sweat from their foreheads, took a long breath, and said in unison. Oh, it's not the Pirate King. I was shocked. Wong Luffy was speechless. Very good, this is very One Piece. At this time, the two pirates seemed to remember something, and immediately drew their swords and pointed them at Wong Luffy and shouted. You're a pirate too. Are you coming with us? Are you here to investigate our pirate group? Humph. We can't let you go. As they spoke, the two men raised their swords and slashed at Wong Luffy. Seeing this, Wong Luffy frowned, thinking that pirates are pirates after all, they can chop you up if they want. If an ordinary person were hit by two such swords, even if he didn't die on the spot, he would lose half his life. Seeing this, the pink-haired boy immediately exclaimed. Be careful. Get out of the way. Unfortunately, this is not the Pokemon world. The rules of divine skills are not applicable in this world. Wong Luffy not only did not dodge, but raised his hands and reached out to the two knives. Snap. The next moment, the two blades were firmly grasped in his hands. Nani. The two pirates, one fat and one thin, were surprised to see that the knife was caught by the other party with bare hands. But what shocked them even more was that they couldn't even move the knife in their hands. You, let go. The two men yelled while their faces turned red. Ignoring the two men's yelling, in order to print out his subconscious thoughts, Wong Luffy's arms suddenly became throbbing with veins, and his palms suddenly exerted force. Crack, crack. Almost at the same time, the two long swords were actually broken by his hands. Seeing this scene, not only the two pirates, but also the pink-haired little boy on the side had their eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and their faces were full of shock. However, even Wong Luffy himself was shocked. He lowered his head and looked at his hands with curiosity and muttered. Huh, can I really break this sword? But his words were like the last straw that broke the camel's back, scaring the two pirates so much that their faces turned pale. In the weakest East China Sea, apart from their monster captain, when have they ever seen a ruthless person who can break a cast-iron long sword? Monster. The two pirates screamed and rushed to the door, but they squeezed at the door of the cabin at the same time, and they were stuck in the door with a bang. Ah, stop pushing, move back now, you. You are the one who should get back off. The two guys squeezed each other at the door for a few seconds until they squeezed the cabin door frame into several cracks and finally squeezed out. Seeing this funny scene, Wong Luffy couldn't help but shake his head slightly. When he was ruthless, he was like a murderer, but when he was cowardly, he was worse than a rat. Bully the weak and fear the strong. Or is this the current situation of pirates? Wong Luffy didn't think about it anymore. He was now reviewing the muscle memory of the previous moment. At least he can control the power of this body now. It won't let him be killed by some small fry in seconds. Turning his head to look at the pink-haired little boy next to him who was looking at him in fear, this pink-haired boy must be Kobe, right? When Wong Luffy was thinking about this, Kobe spoke tentatively. You. Hello, my name is Kirby. May I ask? Well, call me Luffy. Kobe became bolder when he heard that. He pushed his glasses and looked at him seriously. Mr. Luffy, you better run. Those pirates have many companions, and they will definitely bring more people soon. They might even call Miss Alrita. Wong Luffy didn't pay attention to Kobe's words, but took off the straw hat on his head and answered irrelevantly. Kirby. Let me ask you a question. I have a friend. He has received a great favor from another, old friend, so should he inherit his old friend's dream? Quote. Seeing the young man in front of him looking calm and unhurried, Kobe wanted to persuade him again, but after hearing what the young man said, his eyes immediately lit up. Mr. Luffy, I can't comment on other people's dreams from an unknown perspective. Because dreams are very personal but extremely free. If a person loses the opportunity to realize his dreams, how painful it would be, wouldn't it be worse than death? I can deeply understand this point, and I am afraid I will never be able to realize my dream again. So, at least I think that having a dream and inheriting a dream is also a very romantic thing, isn't it? Mr. Luffy. Private but free. Wong Luffy couldn't help but smiled and shook his head when he heard this. Romantic. It's hard for you to have such a deep view at your age. It seems that you have suffered a lot on the pirate ship. Since you think that your dream is freedom, why don't you work hard to run towards your freedom? Kirby heard this and showed a bitter smile that didn't suit his age on his chubby face, and then shook his head. Impossible, absolutely impossible. I am already in a cage, I can't escape from Miss Alrida's control. Wong Luffy shrugged without comment, and did not argue with her, but turned and walked out of the cabin. Seeing Wong Luffy turned around and left, Kobe immediately followed and explained anxiously. Mr. Luffy, you can't go there. Miss Alrida is up there, why are you going there? Wong Luffy turned his head and looked at Kobe with a grin. Now that we're here, instead of wandering around aimlessly, why not do something romantic, right? Romantic things. Kirby was stunned for a moment, then smiled. He hesitated for a moment, but still followed Luffy out of the cabin. As soon as they left the kitchen, they saw the door of the cabin on the other side being carefully opened. Then an orange-haired girl wearing a headscarf and blue tights slowly stepped out with a bag on her back, sticking out her hips. But she obviously didn't expect that there would be someone in this place at this time. Ah! It's a thief. At this moment, she suddenly heard a voice behind her that revealed her identity, and she screamed in fear. Ah! After screaming and turning around, the girl was relieved to find that it was a boy and a child. She glared at the two fiercely. Who was talking nonsense just now? I am not a thief. But as soon as she finished speaking, the other side immediately responded. You are. This time she finally locked onto her target. A boy wearing a straw hat, a sleeveless red vest and blue shorts was looking at her with a smile. His eyes seemed to tell her that everything about her was seen through. The orange-haired girl tightly grasped the opening of the cloth bag on her back with one hand and clenched her fist with the other hand to protest to Wong Luffy. I am not. Who are you, you? How can you insult someone's innocence out of thin air? Believe it or not, I will beat you up, you little brat. Yeah. Nami is a little immature now, but also very cute. Wong Luffy looked at Nami with satisfaction. He didn't care about her threat at all. Instead, he was in a bad mood and wanted to try out the words introduced in the blue panel. Looking at Nami, Wong Luffy chuckled. We'll share it in half when we meet. Little thief cat, you don't want your treasure to be taken away by the pirates above, do you? If you don't give it to me, I'll scream. But Wong Luffy was stunned as soon as he said this, because the blue light screen appeared in front of him again, and a line of words appeared on it. Nami, strategy progress, 1%. It actually works. What an evil trigger. Moreover, Nami and Kobe can't see this light curtain. Before Wong Luffy could think about it, he was pulled back by the sound of the floor shaking. Bang bang bang. Nami stomped her feet on the ground angrily, glared at him fiercely and gritted her teeth. No. Why should I split it in half just because you said so? I'll split it 30% and 70%. After Wong Luffy found that the panel really worked, he didn't get anxious, but pretended to be regretful and said. How come it's only 70%? Kirby poked him. 70% of it belongs to someone else. Sighing. Wong Luffy looked at Nami and said. Pay the money and leave. Nami immediately looked at the bag he was holding behind him with caution. No. What if I give you the money and you start yelling for help? Wong Luffy looked at her seriously. Although I'm a pirate, I always keep my word. A real man should stick to his word. If I say 70%, it's 70%, no bargaining. It's probably mine. Mine. Nami jumped up and pointed at herself. But at this moment, Wong Luffy's ears moved, his expression changed, and he swung his arm towards Nami. Then, under the shocked eyes of Nami and Kobe, Wong Luffy's arm stretched out like rubber, and then wrapped around Nami's slender waist like a rope. Nami, who was pulled to the side, immediately let out a terrified cry, but before she could say anything else, a loud noise and a huge vibration interrupted her words. Crack. Boom. Bang. Soon, Nami was horrified to find that the wooden board where she was before had been smashed into a dent. And this dent was caused by a tall and fat female pirate who broke through the splint above her head and fell down. It was Alrida. Nami's pupils shrank, and she understood that if she had not dodged just now, she would not be killed, but at least half her life would be smashed away. Although she didn't understand why the boy's hands could make such a strange move, she understood that it was this boy who saved her. Quite handsome, this straw hat boy. Looking at the boy's slightly shadowed profile under the straw hat, she thought. But at this moment, a hoarse voice interrupted the girl's thoughts. Hey, boy, if I saw it right, your arms seem to have stretched out. You don't look like the legendary long-armed people, so. Did you eat a devil fruit? Bang. As she spoke, Alrida slammed the huge mace in her hand to the ground, making her power even more powerful. Wong Luffy suddenly grinned and said. Yes. I am a rubber man who ate the human fruit, emotional form. As long as I have the emotional blessing of a beautiful woman, my fighting power will become infinitely powerful. Without the sincere blessing of a beautiful woman, I will become much weaker than Kobe. Hey, there is no need to add it so many times. Kobe on the side raised his hand and hit King Luffy's arm. Upon hearing this, Alrida's eyes immediately lit up. Oh. Human fruit, rubber man in emotional form. It is indeed a devil fruit, very strange indeed, a fruit type rarely heard of. Of course not. Even I haven't heard of it myself. Wong Luffy grinned and looked at Nami who had an unpleasant expression beside him and said. What should we do? How about Kobe and I stop them, and you run first? There is no reason for a beautiful girl like you to be buried with two grown men like us. That would be a waste of nature's gift. Nami's body was shocked when she heard that, but she didn't say anything at the first time, but remained silent. Kobe's eyes were filled with tears, and he yelled in his heart, We are not that familiar, are we? Why do you want to drag me in? Hey, I'm still a child. Hello, Kirby. Alrida's voice, like that of a demon from the abyss, echoed in the narrow cabin. Are you sure you want to go with this guy from nowhere to stop Captain Alrida, the most beautiful and powerful captain in the ocean? Kobe opened his mouth, but didn't say yes or no for a long time. But at this time, Nami's words gave him some time to breathe. Hey, your arm did stretch just now, I did see it, and I did feel it. So is what you just said true? As long as a beautiful woman's sincere emotions bless you, you can become stronger. If I help you, how strong can you become? Can you defeat this woman? Hearing this, Wong Luffy was stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look at Nami who had a serious face, and nodded seriously. Easy. Quote. Then tell me, how can I help you? Nami also looked at him seriously. I haven't figured out how to edit it yet. No, I haven't figured out what to do yet. Bah. Seeing that Wong Luffy didn't speak for a long time, Nami kissed him on the left side of his face, looked at him seriously and said. Is this enough? Nami's strategy progress. 10%. Enable 10% strategy progress reward. You will get 300 daily reward. Wow. Is it really useful? 300 points of power in one go. Isn't that equal to half of Khalifa? This cheat is really simple and crude. But I like it. Wong Luffy complained inwardly. After feeling the sudden expansion of heat in his body, he was shocked and felt a huge force filling his body. He stomped his feet subconsciously. Boom. The next moment, the wooden floor of the corridor cracked and extended to the wall. At the same time, the huge ship was shaken left and right by this huge force. The pirates watching around were shaken to the ground like Alrida. I'm so hot. Wong Luffy roared happily, and he jumped up with Nami and Kobe, who were also staggering, in one hand, and jumped directly onto the deck above. He looked at the stunned Nami and smiled. How about I didn't lie to you? Nami came back to her senses at this time, closed her wide mouth and stared at him with a pair of big eyes in disbelief. It's actually true. Watch out behind you. But as soon as she finished speaking, a look of fear suddenly appeared on her face. Wong Luffy only saw the huge mace flying towards them from behind with a glance, and at the same time, he heard Alrita's hoarse roar. Hey! Don't think you can be so arrogant just because you ate the devil fruit. Anyway, as long as you kill that little fool, you will be nothing. Bang! But Wong Luffy had no intention of dodging, and even deliberately used his body to block Nami's body and protected her in his arms, taking the mace. Ah! Nami screamed in shock, she never thought that this young man she just met would do this for her. Humph! Woman, what's with that expression on your face? You don't think you'll be hurt by such a trick, do you? Wong Luffy let go of Nami, who had just been in his arms, as if nothing had happened, and said with a cocky face. I ate the human fruit emotional man in rubber form. Ah, this. Kobe on the side whispered. Hey, Mr. Luffy, didn't you just say that you are the rubber man who ate the human fruit, the emotional form? When Kobe finished speaking, he saw Wong Luffy suddenly turn his head and stare at him with murderous eyes, causing Kobe to shut his mouth pitifully. Is it important? I ask you, is it important, Kobe? Just knowing that I am invincible is enough. You just think too much. Kobe, didn't you say before that you were like being in a cage in the past 2 years? In that case, let me help you break this cage, how about it? After saying that, Wong Luffy turned around and looked at Alrita coming up from below, then he took a step forward, looked around and shouted. I'm going to beat 10 of them. However, the other party was a pirate and had no intention of abiding by the rules of the underworld. The fat man in blue and white striped clothes suddenly yelled. Brothers, the idea is difficult, don't be polite to him, let's work together. Oh. After hearing the fat pirate's roar, the other pirates seemed to have drunk fake wine, and dozens of them drew their various weapons and rushed towards Wong Luffy and the others. Ah! It's over, it's over. Nami and Kobe had never seen such a momentum before, and now they were on the splint, with nowhere to run, so they could only scream. However, Wong Luffy remained calm, looking at the dozens of people rushing towards him and spreading his hands. You don't follow the rules of the martial arts world, right? Then there's no point in talking. As he spoke, Wong Luffy had already slightly turned sideways, and then he shouted. Super Strike Rubber Whip. Then, under everyone's shocked gaze, Wong Luffy turned sideways and raised his foot to sweep them from more than 10 meters in the air. The next moment, they saw that the boy, who was only about 1.78 meters tall, swept his foot horizontally, and stretched his foot for dozens of meters to sweep all of them at once. Bang bang bang. Immediately, a huge force came from this foot, sweeping over all the dozens of people who rushed forward, and those who were close to the edge of the guardrail directly broke the guardrail and flew dozens of meters away into the sea in the distance. One move. Dozens of ferocious pirates were killed in one move. Kobe's eyes widened, and this scene left a deep impression in his young mind. Oh. Kill them, kill these stinky pirates. Don't worry, I will definitely give you 30% of your money. Come on. This beautiful girl is your strongest backer, go for it. Ah. Be careful. Nami's reaction was much more realistic. Seeing this scene, it was as if she was the player who won by doing nothing, was jumping and shouting 666 to his teammates excitedly. But the battle was not over yet. Almost at the same time when Wong Luffy swept away the group of minions and Nami shouted excitedly. Alrita had already dropped from the sky with a huge mace and smashed it on his head. Wong Luffy ignored it and just looked at the other party quietly. Go to hell, kid. Alrita roared as she fell from the sky. Luffy, however, smiled and raised his head to hit the huge mace that was falling down. Nami and Kobe were so scared that their faces turned pale when they saw this scene. They covered their mouths with their hands and their heads were covered with cold sweat. Bang! Bang! The sound of the mace hitting Luffy's head and the sound of Alrita falling to the ground rang out at the same time. Just when everyone thought that this King Luffy was going to be smashed and bloodied, a slightly teasing voice came from under the mace. Hey! It's useless. Nani? Alrita raised her mace in disbelief, looking at the unharmed boy opposite her, her fat face full of shock and disbelief, followed by anger. Bang 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 bang. Ola 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 ola. The next moment, Alrida roared and raised the mace again to smash it towards Luffy's head. It's useless, 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 useless. Wong Luffy was not affected at all. At the same time, he swung his hands backwards, directly swinging his arms dozens of meters away, and then used his head to bang to deflect the mace, and smiled at Alrida. I'll give you a trip you can take at any time. Miss Alrida, we'll meet again if we're lucky. Rubber rocket launcher. Bang. As Wong Luffy roared, his two arms, which were thrown dozens of meters away, were like two lightning bolts, and his palms hit Alrida's stomach, directly breaking it into a U shape. Whoosh. The next second, Alrida's fat and tall body was blown up into the sky and disappeared in front of everyone. Luffy pulled up the straw hat with his left hand and put it on his head. With the force of the rubber rebounding, his body snapped and turned in the air and fell to the ground. At this time, Luffy leaned sideways, holding the straw hat with his left hand and glanced at the pirates holding their weapons high. Seeing this scene, the pirates who were eager to try lay back to their original positions. Seeing the dozen or so sailors sneaking around on the second deck, Wong Luffy waved at them. Come on. Tie them up. Throw all their weapons into the sea. Otherwise they will disturb me from looting their ships. The dozen sailors targeted by Wong Luffy didn't dare to say a word, and immediately took out the huge hemp rope on the ship and used all their strength to tie up the pirates. Seeing this, Wong Luffy glanced at Nami with satisfaction, pretending to be ignorant and said, Little thief cat, you haven't told me your name yet. Nami, just call me Nami. Nami spun around excitedly. Okay, stop talking nonsense. Can we go and search for treasure on their ship? Wong Luffy rolled his eyes. Your treasure will be divided into 30% and 70% and theirs will be 70% and 30%. Do you understand what I mean? Nami's face instantly fell in excitement. But there was nothing she could do but agree. After all, who wouldn't be happy to pick up 30% of the treasure for free? After spending more than 10 minutes to plunder the treasure of the Alrida pirates, they borrowed an escape boat with a small cabin from this huge merchant ship and escaped before the navy arrived. As for why he didn't use Alrida's pirate ship, of course, it was because he didn't want to be chased by the navy yet. At least until he completely mastered all the moves and powers of this body, especially the 300 Dao forces he had just obtained, his control was not mature at all. Anyway, there will be a ship sooner or later. Compared with the well-known Alrida, which is easy to cause trouble in this sea area. The merry is the faith. At this moment, Kobe sat next to Luffy who was leaning against the stern railing. Hey, Luffy, what are you laughing at? I remembered the happy things. Huh. Can you tell me what's going on? Aren't we going to send you to Shield's Town? It just so happens that the third partner I'm looking for is also there. The third one. Then who is the second one? Nami. I didn't say I wanted to be a pirate with you, asshole. Pirates are the worst. Ah this. So Mr. Luffy, who is your third partner? Hey. You little brat, don't take me for granted as the second one, you. The third one. Let's say Lu Saolong. Who? Three Swords style pirate hunter Rorano Azoro. Ah. Ah. Kobe and Nami screamed at the same time. In a deserted alley in Shield's Town. Kobe murmured dejectedly. How is it possible? How is it possible? Pirate hunters are not bad people, but the Navy has caused public outrage. Is this really the Navy I yearn for? Is such a Navy really just? After landing on the island, Wong Luffy did not go straight to the naval bases in the original work. No matter what the original work said, he still wanted to see it with his own eyes and judge it through his own understanding. Kobe and Nami also agreed after hearing what he said. But after some inquiries, the three of them also had their own understandings. Wong Luffy nodded with satisfaction. Kobe was dejected. Nami was thoughtful. Snap. Snap. Compared to the dejected Kobe, Nami recovered quickly. She patted Kobe on the shoulder and sighed. Is there anything strange about this? The Navy is rubbish except Belmere. In my opinion, the Navy here is pretty good, at least they don't help the evil and associate with pirates. Why is this happening? After hearing what Nami said, Kobe became even more withdrawn. The gap between his dream and reality was so huge that it was hard for him to accept it for a while. He kept grabbing his hair with both hands and muttered. Why is it like this? It shouldn't be like this. Luffy, who had been silent all this time, suddenly chuckled. Nami glared at him, thinking that Kobe was about to collapse and you were still in the mood to laugh. Just as she was about to open her mouth to scold him, she heard the boy speak. Kobe. The world really shouldn't be like this. But the world is already like this. Wong Luffy put his hand on Kobe's head and said. Don't worry about what is just, what is right, what should be done, and what should not be done. Since you have decided to be a navy, then do it. Since the navy of your dreams is just and upright, then do it. But I need you to think about 2 points. What is the essence of a soldier? Why does the army exist? This world is already rotten, and it needs new blood to bring it new vitality. Is the navy justice? Pirates or evil? Kobe, all this needs your own eyes to witness, and your own hands to open up. Quote. Pa. Pa. After saying that, Wong Luffy patted Kobe on the head twice and turned away. Let's go, I'm going to see my third partner. After hearing Luffy's words, Nami, who was looking at his back, was stunned for a moment, and then she followed him and scolded. I told you not to count me in. Kobe, who was also looking at Luffy's back, suddenly stood up, clenched his fists, and said in a trembling voice. Mr. Luffy, can I really do this alone? If you think you can't do it alone, then go find like-minded comrades. Wong Luffy, who walked to the entrance of the alley, suddenly turned around and looked at Kobe with a grin. Don't you know that a single spark can start a prairie fire? Kobe's eyes became brighter and brighter, and then he shouted. Mr. Luffy, I will definitely achieve my justice. Hearing Kobe's words, Nami's mouth corners slightly raised. A Navy man was taught and inspired by a pirate. It was really funny. That being said, Nami didn't know that when she looked at the figure of the Straw Hat Boy in front of her, there was light in her eyes. That light has a name, it is hope. In front of the naval base. Nami and Kobe slowed down a little. Just as they were looking for Wong Luffy, they suddenly heard a little girl screaming. Ah! Rubber rubber, balloon. As soon as Nami and Kobe turned the corner of the Navy wall, they saw Luffy's body turned into a big balloon and caught a little girl thrown out from the wall. Hey, it's so soft, hee hee. The little girl who was trapped in Wong Luffy's belly immediately forgot her fear and happily pinched the rubber balloon that Wong Luffy had turned into and laughed happily. After Wong Luffy's belly bounced the little girl up, he immediately returned to his original state, hugged her in his arms as she exclaimed, and smiled at her. How about it? Fun, right? It's fun, thank you brother, hee hee. The little girl in the blue and white striped dress grinned. Then you can tell your brother who threw you out. Luffy continued to look at the little girl with a smile. It's those Navy. The little girl suddenly became angry and clenched her fists. What? Kirby, who had just regained some of his fighting spirit in the distance, became depressed again and stood there like a bereaved person. Nami walked over quickly, her face looking a little grim. What's going on? Wong Luffy spread his hands. Quote. I don't know. When I came here, I saw the Navy bullying the kids. After Luffy and his friends came to rescue Zoro, they immediately explained the whole story in detail. After listening to it, Kobe completely shut himself off. Originally, they only got some general information, but now after hearing the person involved's story, Kobe and Nami felt that these Navy officers were even more hateful. King Luffy already had a plan in mind, and his expression did not change at all. After sending the little girl away, he jumped directly onto the wall. Seeing this, Kobe, who was just in grief, was immediately shocked and said, Mr. Luffy, Lee is doing something stupid. This is a naval base, you can't barge in here. What the hell is a naval base? I'm barging in a naval base. Luffy, squatting on the wall, just turned around and grinned at Kobe, then held the straw hat on his head with his left hand, put his right hand on his right knee, and looked around at the naval base in front of him. Soon, King Luffy saw the green algae head in his memory. But before he could speak, the Tide Zoro suddenly spoke in a cold tone. Where did you come from, little devil? If you don't want to die, get out of here. Tisk. The aloof Zoro. Wong Luffy was shocked, and suddenly a sly smile appeared on the corner of his mouth and he shouted. Hey, are you Zoro? Did you hear our conversation with the little girl just now? Since the Navy is going to go back on its word and not keep its promise to you, why don't you become my partner as a pirate? How about that, Zoro. Zota, who was originally aloof, was instantly broken when he heard this, and turned around and yelled at Luffy, who was squatting on the wall without any image. I'll kill you, stinking pirate. Can you please check someone's name before recruiting them next time? Remember this. My name is Roronoa Zoro. I'm going to be the world's greatest swordsman. Okay, Lu Sauron. Wong Luffy spread his hands. Actually, it is useless for you to show off to me, because you will be shot soon. Zoro. Can you still pretend to be cool? Zoro looked at the Straw Hat Kid not far away with an expressionless face and complained in his heart. He. Then he heard the Straw Hat Boy grinning. How about it? Roronoa Zoro. Do you want to be my partner and join me in turning this corrupt world upside down? Zoro's expression and tone were still cold, but there was a glimmer in his eyes, and his words were somewhat relaxed. Did you just hear that? My ambition is to become the world's greatest swordsman. Are you sure your pirate group can handle my ambition? The world's greatest swordsman. Ha 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 ha. Wong Luffy laughed loudly after hearing this, then slowly stood up on the wall, pressed down the straw hat on his head with his left hand, and nodded slightly. It's a good dream. In this case, before I smash this filthy world and reshape it, I will walk the world with the goal of becoming the Pirate King. Quote. Inheriting other people's dreams is indeed a very romantic thing. After hearing what King Luffy said, Zoro was stunned for a moment, and then he also laughed with his head raised. Ha 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 ha. Pirate King. What a Pirate King. I don't know if you are really powerful or if you are ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth, but if one day you cannot realize my ambition, then you can commit seppuku to apologize to me. I have subdued Lu Zoro. V V. Wong Luffy almost shouted a victory slogan, but he held it back. However, before he could make any move, dozens of figures appeared from the big iron gate in the distance, and then a deep and rough voice came over. Sorry, I think I disturbed your children's game of house. After hearing the iron gate open, Wong Luffy saw dozens of marines lined up in front of him, and behind them a tall figure nearly 3 meters tall also walked slowly. Especially when he saw that the place where his arm should have been on his right hand had become a huge axe, Wong Luffy was immediately shocked. This is the 6th emperor of the pirate legend. Axe King Monka. When the bound Zoro saw King Luffy staring blankly at the Navy team coming over, he couldn't help but yell at him. What are you still daydreaming about? Come and help me untie the rope. Do you want to see me get shot? Hearing Zoro's roar, Wong Luffy laughed and held down Kobe and Nami who had just poked their heads out of the wall with his hands and said, Stay here and don't move. I'll be back soon. The group of sailors who were approaching also obviously heard Soren's voice. At this time, Colonel Monka behind them directly scolded. What are you still hesitating about? Shoot these two who want to be pirates right here. No one is allowed to cause trouble in the great Colonel Monka's base. Yes. Hearing Monka's roar, the Navy soldiers shuddered in fear, and then raised their guns and pointed them at Zoro reluctantly. Seeing the dozens of volleys of gunfire, even Zoro was disappointed. At this moment, he couldn't help but think of the scene where he surrendered for the sake of the unrelated mother and daughter. Did he regret it? No regrets. Zoro was sure of his heart almost instantly, and just sighed unwillingly. Am I going to end up like this? Swoosh. But the next moment, he felt a figure suddenly flash 2 meters in front of him. Bang bang bang. Almost at the same time, the dozens of volleys of guns on the opposite side opened fire instantly. Luffy. Mr. Luffy. On the wall in the distance, Nami and Kobe screamed in fear when they saw Luffy opening his arms to block Zoro. Hey, you guy. Zoro's pupils suddenly shrank. He never thought that a stranger would risk his own life to block a gunshot for him. Even though they were meeting for the first time, it was impossible for Zoro not to be moved at this moment. But the next second, Zoro's eyes widened in shock. Not only him, but everyone present was dumbfounded when they saw that the bullet did not penetrate the boy, but only left a few rubber-like trajectories. Immediately, as Wong Luffy clenched his open hands into fists, dozens of bullets instantly bounced back in the direction they came from. Ah! Many Navy officers were frightened by this scene and immediately fell to the ground, but many of them avoided being shot. Colonel Monka walked out of the crowd slowly, holding the axe in his right hand, and looked at Wong Luffy and said in a deep voice. Devil fruit user. Wong Luffy nodded calmly and said. Yes, I am an emotional person who ate the human form of the rubber fruit. Kobe muttered at the wall in the distance. Why do I feel that Mr. Luffy is talking about something different again? Nami heard this and thought for a while, wanting to say something but stopping herself, and finally chose to ignore him. Anyway, it is the kind of strange devil fruit that can become stronger as long as it is astringent. Colonel Monka was also choked. I am not well educated, so don't lie to me. What kind of devil fruit is this? Why haven't I heard of it? But for the sake of his own face, he couldn't show his ignorance, and nodded solemnly. Oh, is this the devil fruit? Boy, tell me your name. I, Monka, never kill nameless devils. Wong Luffy hesitated for 2 seconds and said. My name is Pirate King Luffy. Monka's iron-clad jaw opened and closed wildly when he heard this. Ha 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 ha, Pirate King Luffy. You are so arrogant. But that's right, with such a magical devil fruit, it's no wonder you have such ambitions. Upon hearing this, King Luffy stretched out his hand and opened his 5 fingers, then clenched them and opened them again, wanting to say something but stopping himself, and then sighed. Forget it, do whatever you want, I won't struggle anymore. Pirate King Luffy, just Pirate King Luffy. It doesn't matter anyway. Humph. Monka sneered. Not to mention that you are not the Pirate King yet. Even if you are the Pirate King Luffy, you can't save anyone from my base of Monka. In this case, I will chop off your head, a pirate with a devil fruit, as one of my merits for promotion to Major General. After saying that, Monka waved the axe in his hand and pointed it at Luffy, and shouted to the dozens of navy in front. What are you guys still standing there for? Come on. Luffy was stunned for a moment, and so were the dozens of Marines on the opposite side. According to the rules of the underworld, shouldn't you, Monka, take action personally at this time? Good fellow. You are worthy of being the Axe King Monka. You are worthy of being the world of pirates. Not only do pirates not follow the rules of the underworld, but the Marines have no shame at all. Luffy sucked his teeth. Seeing that his men had no intention of moving, Colonel Monka raised the giant axe in his right hand and knocked down a Marine in front of him with a bang, and said coldly. Do you want to disobey the great Colonel Monka? The surrounding navy saw their comrades being hit on the head and fainting on the ground. Their fear of Monka overcame their fear of the unknown. Ah! Then, all the navy soldiers roared and slashed towards Luffy with their swords. Hey! Luffy, untie the rope for me first. Seeing that one wave of trouble had not yet subsided, another wave of trouble arose. Zoro could not tie it up at this time, and he struggled madly and spoke to Luffy. There is no need for that. Luffy turned his back to Zoro and waved his hands casually, then turned his body slightly to the side, pressed his straw hat on his head with one hand and said. Just watch your captain's performance quietly. Rubber, super rubber whip modified. Then everyone saw Luffy, who was leaning sideways, kicking the dozens of navy hollows rushing towards him. Whoosh! Before everyone could come to their senses, they saw Luffy's kicking foot instantly stretched out dozens of meters, and then swept horizontally with a huge force towards the dozens of navy soldiers rushing over. This time Luffy was more skilled in using his strength and moves. After becoming fully familiar with the 300 Dowley he had gained, his kick was more powerful than before, and many Marines were directly swept away. The Marines were huddled together and then swept away by Luffy. Many of the Marines who had just been swept away fell from the sky, forming a small hill. In just one breath, dozens of Marines were knocked down by Luffy's kick. Swish! Snap! Then, the stretched leg retracted in an instant. At this time, Luffy stood on one leg with his left hand holding the straw hat, and shook the leg that had just retracted towards Monka who was looking unpleasant in the distance. Axe Monk, now it's your turn. Axe King Monka. Colonel Monka was stunned for a moment, then he slapped the axe on his right arm and laughed. Ha 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 ha, that's a nice name, I like it. Since you're so sensible, I'll let you die faster. Dong dong dong. After saying that, Monka's huge figure approached Luffy at an unexpectedly fast speed. Hey! Be careful, that guy is not weak. The bound Zoro said in a deep voice. There is no difference. Luffy held up his straw hat with his left hand to let the shadow cover one side of his cheek. He just stared at Colonel Monka who was rushing towards him and spoke calmly. He and those navy soldiers are the same to me. Zoro narrowed his eyes slightly. Hearing the calm tone of the Straw Hat Boy, he wanted to see how strong the other party was. Are you too scared to move, kid? Swoosh. When he got close, Monka suddenly jumped up high and roared at Luffy, then raised the huge axe and chopped down at Luffy's head. Die little devil. Why? Luffy sighed, and swung his right hand back violently, clenched it into a fist, and looked at Monka who was falling. I was originally thinking if I could see some sick styles in you. I didn't expect you couldn't even shave. You're too weak. Facing the axe coming down from Monka, Luffy just took a step to the side and dodged the attack easily. Boom. Crack, crack. Monka's axe chopped the ground directly, creating a huge gap where Luffy was standing, and the ground sank a lot. If an ordinary person was hit by this axe, he would definitely be killed instantly. No wonder these Marines are so afraid of him. His nearly 3-meter height is not in vain, at least he has a lot of strength. Monka also gained a little confidence from the power of this axe, and shouted to Luffy on the side. Don't be so arrogant, you little brat. I can't use the 6 styles against you. Pompous. Luffy still held his straw hat with his left hand, and shook his right arm slightly. The arm that had been thrown out dozens of meters bounced back in the blink of an eye. With a swoosh sound, he punched Monka hard in front of his stunned eyes. On top of the chin. Bang. Whoosh. Boom boom boom. It's you. As Luffy finished speaking, Monka spat out a mouthful of bloody broken teeth, and flew backwards like a meteor chasing the moon, smashing several walls of the naval base in succession and finally crashing into a huge rock in the training ground before stopping. Whoosh. Pa. Luffy retracted his arm, which had shrunk in the blink of an eye. He shook his fist slightly, then shook off the blood stains on it and spoke calmly. Rubber, ordinary punch. Zoro, Nami and Kirby in the distance, and the Navy soldiers lying on the ground pretending to be dead were all stunned when they saw Luffy burst out with such power with just one punch. You call this a normal punch? Many Navy soldiers present were swallowing their saliva as they looked at Monka, whose entire face was deformed and motionless after a big hole was smashed into several layers of the wall. The expressions of the group of Navy soldiers who were originally lying on the ground pretending to be dead changed from shock to disbelief, and finally to ecstasy. Ha 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 ha. Monka was finally killed. We are free brothers. He has also had this day. He has also had this day. Ha ha ha. Looking at those Navy soldiers who didn't even pretend to be dead anymore, Luffy shook his head, then glanced at Zoro who was also shocked, grinned and said. How about Lu Sauron? Your captain is very strong, right? Very strong. Zoro responded subconsciously, and then he reacted and yelled at Luffy. Asshole. I already told you my name is Roronoa Zoro. Remember it, idiot. Okay, Lu Solan. I'm going to chop you up sooner or later. Zoro's spirit suddenly waned when he said this. It seems that you have been abused a lot during this period. Luffy laughed, swung his arm to a Navy soldier and snatched the long sword from his hand, then grinned at them. Borrow a knife to use. Swoosh. Swish. Swish. After cutting the ropes that bound Zoro, Luffy looked at the weak Zoro and said with a smile. Hey, you're not that weak, are you? Why are you so weak? Asshole. Zoro no longer had the energy to curse, he rolled his eyes and said weakly. What would happen if you were locked up for more than half a month without being given any food? Tisk, have you been locked up for that long? That's too bad. Why do you look so happy about this? Hey, where are you going? Can't we just climb over the wall and get out? Don't you need to take your weapon back? Also, of course, to cut the grass, you have to uproot it. Don't you understand this? Hearing Luffy's words, Nami and Kobe, who had just run over, were stunned for a moment, and Zoro's relaxed expression became solemn. Then he didn't say anything, followed Luffy through several large holes in the wall, and walked to Monka, whose face was deformed and fainted. The group of Navy behind only dared to watch from a distance and did not dare to get too close. To put it bluntly, they are just a group of ordinary people wearing Navy uniforms, otherwise they would not be assigned to the weakest border island in the East China Sea. Do you want to silence him? Road. Mr. Luffy, how about we forget it? Nami and Kobe, who were also following behind Luffy, spoke with complicated expressions. You mean, don't kill him. Let him wake up and continue to destroy the town. Luffy's expression didn't change when he heard it, he just looked at the two calmly. Zoro leaned against a wooden stake on the side, didn't say anything, and looked at Nami and Kobe with his arms around his chest. No, 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 that's not what I meant. I meant to tie him up and give him to. Kobe suddenly couldn't continue talking here. Leave it to the Navy. These Navy have been under the tyranny of Monka for so long, can they really deal with Monka properly? What's more, a monster like Monka may look weak in front of Mr. Luffy, but for ordinary people he is indeed a monster. This is why so many Navy dare not resist him. Kobe was a little confused for a moment. Nami opened her mouth when she heard Kobe's words, but she didn't say anything for a while. She knows the nature of the Navy best. As long as the Navy is a little useful, it won't be useless. If the Navy is really so righteous, their village would have been rescued long ago, right? She wouldn't have to risk her life alone to steal the pirates' treasures. Click, click, click. Ah. Just as the two of them were hesitating, they heard three sounds that made their scalps numb, followed by Monka's shrill screams. The Navy watching from a distance couldn't help but shudder. Zoro's expression remained unchanged, but a strange color flashed in his eyes. You. Monka, who was awakened by the pain, pointed at Luffy with his only intact left hand, trembling, his eyes full of fear. He originally wanted to pretend to be dead, and wait for these self-righteous little devils to hand him over to the Navy, and then he would find a way to escape. But he didn't expect that this seemingly harmless boy would be so cruel, and directly crippled his legs and the right hand holding the axe. However, Monka didn't expect that things were far from over. Come here and tie him to the stake with chains. Then, prepare a few carriages, and take me to catch Monka's idiot son. Luffy unceremoniously ordered several Navy officers to. We are the Navy. Why should we listen to you? A lieutenant colonel stood up tremblingly. Luffy was a little surprised. Is there anyone who dares to oppose at this time? After taking a look at the lieutenant colonel's face, Luffy had an impression. Kobe's guide. Luffy's mouth corners suddenly raised slightly, raised his hand and pointed. Do you know what my full name is? I don't care what you call me. This is a naval base, you can't run wild. The lieutenant colonel scolded. Nami on the side sneered. Oh, Navy. You have such great authority. You only use it on civilians, right? Why weren't you so active when Monka was here? Are you crazy about becoming a colonel? Or do you want to be the second Monka? You Navy is so disgusting that it makes me want to. The lieutenant colonel of the Navy did not expect that a little girl could be so mean. He could neither beat her nor argue with her, and his face flushed red for a moment. At the same time, it was also because of guilt. The little girl was right. They did not dare to speak out when Monka was there, but now that Monka was defeated, seeing that they were young, he came up to point fingers, which did seem like a mean act. But that's human nature. Don't test it. At least this lieutenant colonel dared to stand up and face a devil fruit user who had just defeated Colonel Monka, which was enough to show his courage. Not everyone wants to be a hero, and not everyone is a hero. Nami wanted to continue talking, but Luffy held her head to stop her from saying the next thing. She shook her head and saw that she couldn't get away, so she glared at Luffy, and then she saw Luffy motioning her to look at Kobe. Nami nodded and said nothing. Luffy looked at the lieutenant colonel and suddenly smiled and said, My full name is Monkey D. Luffy, my grandpa is called Monkey D. Garp. After saying that, Luffy walked up to the lieutenant colonel who was looking at him in astonishment and disbelief, and patted his shoulder. Do you understand what I mean? Do as I say, and I'll give you a Den Den Mushi line later, and you'll understand when you call it. The lieutenant colonel looked at Luffy with an uncertain expression, then nodded slowly, and waved to the marines behind him. Do as he says. An hour and a half later. After eating and drinking, Zoro looked at the three carriages in the distance. He looked at Luffy beside him with a strange expression and said, Luffy, do you really want to do this? He. Luffy grinned. Why not? Robbing the rich and helping the poor, this has been one of my dreams since I was a child. At this point, Luffy waved his hand and said, Okay, stop wasting time. Zoro. Nami. Don't tell me you're not excited. After saying that, he immediately jumped onto the middle carriage. There was a cage on the carriage, and Monka was tied to a cross wooden stake with iron chains. Ha 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 ha, now that you, Captain, have spoken, what else can I not do? Zoro also laughed and jumped onto the carriage next to Luffy, where there was a man with his buttocks and chin tied to a cross stake, Baramal. After struggling and cursing for an hour, Baramal had given up resistance. For him, as long as Luffy and the others didn't kill him, he would be very grateful. At this time, he just lowered his head and said nothing. Monka made the final threat. Kid, are you sure you want to do this? I am a captain in the Navy after all. Even if I made a mistake, it is an internal matter of the Navy. It is not your turn as a pirate to enforce justice. I advise you to take the 100 million berries and run away. I just heard that one of them called the Navy hero Garp who was on vacation in the East China Sea. He is a vice admiral of the Navy. If you don't want to die, run away. In the carriage, Luffy leaned against Monka, holding the straw hat on his head with one hand, and a smile appeared on his face. Isn't it our turn to enforce justice? Then I'll tell you today. From now on, I will take care of things that you Navy dare not take care of. I will do things that you Navy dare not do. Being chivalrous and righteous is exclusive to pirates. Ha 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 ha. Luffy himself laughed at the end. Zoro on the side couldn't help but laugh when he heard this, but there was admiration in his eyes. Nami curled her lips, jumped on the carriage loaded with 100 million Baileys, and took a look at the Baileys in the cloth bags at the back, her eyes full of reluctance. I have nothing to do after eating 100 million Baileys. An average person can't spend all of it in a lifetime. Swoosh. Luffy laughed and grabbed 4 of the largest bags from the carriage behind Nami. Each bag earned 10 million Baileys. After throwing 2 bags to Zoro, he also took 2 bags and put them in front of him. Then he stretched out his hand 5 or 6 meters, patted Nami's little head and laughed. Nami, don't mind this little money. Follow me, I will take you to the Golden Kingdom, Shandora, and you can have as much money as you want. The Golden Kingdom. Nami looked at Luffy and her eyes turned into gold. You said it. I said it. Go. Luffy grinned at Nami, then slapped her on the buttocks with his hand, and waved the reins to drive the carriage out, while grabbing 2 stacks of Bailey and waving them in his hands and shouting. There are 1,000 households in total, 100,000 Baileys per household, don't send it to the wrong person. Go ahead guys. At this time, in the middle of the street in Shields Town. Luffy stood on the carriage in the middle, holding the loudspeaker Den Den Mushi in one hand and controlling the reins with the other hand, shouting. Citizens of Shields Town, my name is Luffy. I have defeated the Colonel Monka you feared. From now on, you don't have to worry about anyone exploiting and squeezing you. If anyone dares to do so, just like me, take up your weapons and protect your homeland. Resist oppression. Resist tyranny. Resist all those who regard the people as enemies. As long as we join hands, there will be no invincible enemy. Monka, who is locked up behind me, is an example. Anyone who is a human will lose. Anyone who is killed will die. Now, I will return all the money that Monka has exploited and squeezed from you over the years. At this point, Luffy paused and roared. Guys, give out money. After hearing Luffy's words, Zoro, whose blood was already boiling, and Nami, whose hands and feet were cold, began to throw money into the houses on both sides of the street. 100,000 Baileys per household. At first, many townspeople did not believe Luffy when he said he had defeated Monka, and they all hid in their houses. But when they saw Monka and Barumber tied up with chains in the cage when the carriage passed by, everyone's eyes widened, their eyes full of shock. After the shock came ecstasy. Especially when they saw 100,000 Baileys thrown in front of them, everyone began to shout wildly. Ah! Oh my god, what am I seeing? The tyrant Monka has finally been defeated. Oh my god, they actually gave us money. As Luffy, Zoro and Nami's troika slowly drove through the street, more and more people hiding in the boxes came out. They first stared at the imprisoned Monka and Barumber in a daze, and then they became angry, and countless rotten leaves and eggs were thrown at the 2 of them. Go to hell Monka. Get out of our town of Shields. Get out of Donghai. Are the hard times finally over? Thank you so much, Mr. Luffy. Quote. Long live Mr. Luffy. Long live Mr. Luffy. Long live Mr. Luffy. Plop plop plop. As one person collapsed and knelt down because of excitement, everything was like dominoes, and people knelt down from both sides of the street. Zoro and Nami were shocked when they saw such a scene for the first time. But at this time, Luffy suddenly stood up, jumped to the top of Monka's iron cage, took a deep breath and shouted loudly. Stand up, don't kneel. All intelligent creatures in the world are equal, there is nothing worthy of your kneeling. I'm just a pirate, I'm not worthy of your kneeling. When I pass through Shield's town, I will do 3 things for nothing else: fairness, fairness, and fairness. Stand up, don't kneel. Hearing Luffy's loud shouts, the people who were kneeling on the ground were shocked at first. Then, one person stood up, 2 people stood up, and everyone stood up. After hearing Luffy's words, everyone present felt as if there was a flame burning in their chest. Immediately, the flame turned into countless roars that resounded throughout the town of Shields. Long live Mr. Luffy! Long live Mr. Luffy! Long live Mr. Luffy! Kobe stood at the gate of the naval base, watching the troika that had long gone, and listening to the excited roars of the townspeople in the distance. He would be lying if he said he wasn't envious. After all, it was undoubtedly a relief to be able to punish the bad guys so swiftly and return all the money embezzled by Monka to the townspeople. But Mr. Luffy's identity is a pirate after all. And his goal is to become a navy. Although the two of them are going in opposite directions, he feels that Mr. Luffy will always be his guide. If he wants to catch up with Mr. Luffy, he must train hard. Aren't you going with them? Just as Kobe was looking at Luffy and the other two going away, a voice suddenly sounded beside him. Kobe was stunned for a moment, and when he turned around and saw the person coming, he immediately said seriously. I want to be a Navy officer. How can I be in the same boat with pirates? Lieutenant Colonel, please let me join the Navy. Whether it's sweeping the floor, doing odd jobs or doing anything else, give me a chance to join the Navy. One day I will let the voice of justice fill this era. The lieutenant colonel's body was shocked when he heard this. He never thought that Kobe's young body had such a great capacity and such a firm belief. After a moment of silence, the lieutenant colonel looked ahead calmly. I can't agree to your request. Kirby was shocked when he heard this, and he felt hopeless for a moment. But the lieutenant colonel's next words made him stunned. Mr. Luffy told me before he left. You are the boy he rescued from Alrata. He said that even if you are in darkness, you still yearn for light. He said that the Navy is lucky to have a boy like you who is committed to justice and has unlimited potential. He said that the small town of Shields will delay your future. So, when Vice Admiral Garp comes, he will take you away and teach you personally. After hearing this, Kobe was already in tears, but he clenched his teeth to prevent himself from crying out loud. Seeing the boy's expression, the lieutenant colonel smiled slightly. You taught a great friend, Kirby. Yes. Kobe yelled with tears in his eyes. The lieutenant colonel patted his shoulder and said. But he's leaving, aren't you going to say goodbye to them? Kobe's body shook, and then he yelled again. Mr. Luffy said that there is no need for farewell between men. See you at the top. The sky was clear and cloudless. The salty sea breeze blew gently, driving a small sailboat on the blue sea to move forward slowly. The boat swayed slightly, and the cool sea breeze made people feel drowsy. In the small cabin, a girl with short orange hair was leaning sideways with one hand on her chin and the other hand casually drawing a sea chart on the table. The white tight-fitting short-sleeved teddy bear and the white tight shorts outlined the girl's immature figure gracefully. A pair of white and smooth long legs overlapped together, with a pair of high-heeled sandals on the toes. The delicate toes like green onions sometimes clenched and sometimes relaxed, letting the slippers swing back and forth, giving a feeling of pure desire and laziness. After drawing the sea chart for a while, the girl seemed a little absent-minded, and her eyes were always looking at the straw hat boy sitting outside the cabin and flipping through a book on the bow, wanting to say something but stopping. The boy was naturally Wong Luffy. But he didn't have the observation hockey now, so he couldn't feel Nami's glances at him from time to time. Moreover, he was concentrating on a booklet. The name of this booklet was, Detailed Explanation of the 6 Styles of Shave and Moon Step. He found it in Monka's office. I didn't expect that this guy had the training methods of the 6 styles but left them there to gather dust. I couldn't understand it. If nothing unexpected happened, this booklet was probably a reward given by the headquarters after he was tricked by 100 Kiro to perform great merit 3 years ago. Tisk, what a pearl covered in dust. Wong Luffy shook his head. Fortunately, it was a bargain for me. After memorizing the contents of the booklet in his mind, he closed his eyes and began to recall Luffy's memories. He saw Luffy being trained by Garp when he was a child, and Garp's continuous recall of the way he used the shaving and moon steps. This is also one of the abilities that King Luffy has after traveling through time, that is, he can clearly extract various memory fragments of Luffy to recall. It's like intercepting movie clips and replaying them. It is precisely because of this that King Luffy can quickly master Luffy's abilities, even better than Luffy's own control. In the original work, when Luffy first went to sea, his ability and strength control were obviously not precise enough. In many battles, he needed to be angry before he could burst out the power he should have. Whether it was fighting that Admiral Click, or Fishman Arlong, it was obvious that Luffy's control of power was not pure. Perhaps this is also related to his own nerves. If it weren't for the protagonist's halo, the Straw Hat Pirates might even be killed when they met the Arlong Pirates. Destroyed. It can only be said that Luffy's character is too casual, and he is very careless, which will lead to fatal mistakes in a battle where his life is at stake. If Luffy's pirate group had taken a wrong step at that time, at least Usopp and Zoro would have died. It can only be said that various coincidences in the early stage led to a lot of unnecessary injuries, which in turn slowed down the improvement of strength. While recalling his memories of One Piece in his previous life, Wong Luffy watched the memory of Luffy being brutally abused by his grandfather Garp. After constantly comparing what he knew about shaving, the training methods introduced in the booklet, and Garp's use of shaving, Wong Luffy soon mastered the use of shaving. It's just that the ship is too small to be used now, and he has to go to the island to practice better. But in fact, he knows that with the ability to extract memories from his own mind and observe them continuously, he feels that if he masters shaving, then he has mastered it. Immediately, Wong Luffy suddenly thought of something, and as soon as he thought about it, a blue personal template light screen appeared in his mind. Aquaman's perfect plot strategy, personal template. Name: Monkey D. Luffy, King Luffy. Fruit: human fruit, mythical beast, Nika form. Fruit moves: rubber pistol, rubber balloon, rubber bazooka, rubber machine gun, rubber super rubber whip gen. Master a skill: open double angle bracket 6 style shaving close double angle bracket. Dao Force 700. Story characters female sign strategy progress 1. Nami, 25%. After seeing the addition of 6 styles shaving on the skill bar that was originally empty, Luffy couldn't help but grin with satisfaction. It seems that he has indeed mastered the shaving skill. But using this method of training in the mind is too outrageous. Luffy muttered in his heart. With such cheating training ability, even without this so-called perfect plot strategy for Sea King template, I am afraid that my progress speed will be several times faster than Luffy in the original work. Calculated from the Dao power of the personal template, Luffy had at least 400 Dao power when he first went to sea, which seems to be really not low. With such Dao power plus the increase in his fruit ability, it is not surprising that he was able to defeat Rob Lucci, whose Dao power is much higher than his own, in the later period. Now with the extra 300 Dao power reward obtained from Nami, Luffy's initial strength has almost doubled. I have to say, plot strategy template is still fragrant. Hey, suddenly Luffy's eyes fixed. He saw that Nami's strategy progress increased by 15%. It seems that this is related to what he did after defeating Monka. If the progress of withdrawing rewards is 10%, 30%, 50%, 70% and 100%, then there is only 5% left to withdraw rewards. Thinking of this, Wong Luffy smiled even more happily. Just when Wong Luffy was happy, he suddenly heard Nami's voice coming from the cabin. Hey, Luffy, what are you grinning at over there? Luffy opened his eyes and met Nami's big, sad eyes. He was stunned for a moment and said subconsciously. I thought of happy things. What a joke. Nami pulled open the windshield of the cockpit and said to him seriously. Is it really okay for us to just leave like this without saying goodbye to Kobe? When Nami said this, Zoro, who had been sleeping on the stern deck, slowly opened his eyes, but he still did not move. Nami. Kobe is a navy, we are pirates. How can the navy and pirates say goodbye? Wong Luffy raised his hand to hold down his straw hat, letting the shadow cover his eyes. Hearing Wong Luffy's words, Nami's expression froze, and Zoro raised his eyebrows. But when they heard Wong Luffy's next words, they both smiled at the same time. There is no need for goodbyes between men. Kobe and I have an agreement. When we meet again, it will be the peak of the era. Nami breathed a sigh of relief and glanced at Luffy with a reproachful look. Then you can do whatever you want. I don't care about you. Bang. After saying that, Nami pulled up the windshield again. This time, she could devote herself to drawing the sea chart. Zoro, who was lying at the stern, closed his eyes again, but the corners of his mouth curled up. See you at the top. Then you have to work hard, Kobe. The next morning. Luffy, wake up. There is an island ahead, we should go up there to restock our supplies. Luffy, who was sleeping soundly on the bow, was pulled up by Nami. After he washed his face with seawater, Zoro also came over and said in a deep voice. Hey, Luffy, look over there. Hearing Zoro's words, Nami and Luffy also looked over there. Then they saw a pirate ship with a clown skull flag docked at the port of the island. It's the Buggy the Clown Pirates. After seeing this logo, Nami's face suddenly changed and she screamed. Oh, oh, oh. Wong Luffy suddenly became excited and shouted excitedly. Business is coming. Business is coming. Nami was anxious when she heard this, and she grabbed Luffy's arm and said. Hey Luffy. That's the Buggy Pirates. He's much more famous in the East Sea than that Alrata. Zoro flicked his thumb on the sword, and the Wado Ikimonji came out of the sheath with a swoosh. What are you afraid of? Just cut it with a knife and it will be over. Hey, you too. Nami was speechless. Luffy patted Zoro on the shoulder and said with a smile. Zoro, this guy is the nemesis of your swordsman. Leave Buggy to me, and you can deal with the other minions. Zoro was unhappy when he heard it. Hey, Luffy. I don't believe there is any swordsman's nemesis. Luffy grinned and said. But he really is. You also know that I am a rubber man who ate the rubber fruit emotional form, right? Zoro nodded. Nami was puzzled. Why does it feel that every time I say your fruit, it is different? Luffy waved his hand to indicate that Nami should not pay attention to these details, and then said. This clown Buggy also ate a devil fruit. But he ate the parahuman type split fruit. The ability is to split the body into countless pieces. So, if you chop him with a knife, it is equivalent to helping him break down, and it will not cause any harm to him. Even using armament haki has no effect. It can be said that this kind of fruit is a natural swordsmanship nemesis. Zoro was stunned when he heard this. Is there such a shameless fruit? Doesn't that mean that all swordsmanship can't do anything to him? And what do you mean by haki just now? Luffy spread his hands. Of course, there may be swordsmanship that can work on him, but this is basically the case unless you reach the level of a swordsman or a great swordsman. At this point, Luffy shook his head and sighed. This is an ability that can restrain any devil fruit user. Even if I have the ability of rubber, I will be hurt if I am hit by a fist with haki. In theory, everyone has haki in their body, but it has not been developed. And I am still groping, and I have not been able to master it. I can only say that this thing is still too far away for us now. Zoro said solemnly. Is there still domineering power for a swordsman or a great swordsman? Is it necessary to reach this level? Nami, who was standing on the side, was a little confused when she heard their conversation, but with her intelligence, she naturally understood the importance of haki. Therefore, Nami also took note of the content. Nami, who was originally nervous about seeing Buggy's pirate group, also relaxed when the two people didn't care about Buggy. At this moment, Nami even had the urge to tell the Straw Hat Boy about her ultimate fear. But after thinking about it, she finally held back. After landing and tying up the boat, Nami saw the two guys preparing to go straight to the town. She couldn't help but yell at them. Hey, you two, don't you want the money on the ship anymore? You want me to take it alone? Come and help me. Hearing Nami's roar, Luffy and Zoro looked at each other, then ran back angrily, each carrying a large bag of golden Bailey, and walked slowly into the town. The total amount of golden Bailey they have now is about 60 million. Some are golden jewelry from Alrata, and some are naturally from Monka. Although 100 million was distributed to the townspeople, he is King Luffy, not Luffy, and he won't be so stupid as to not take any. After all, the people's money has been returned in full, and the gentry's money will naturally be taken away. Ah, this won't work, I have to find some little brothers. Luffy scratched his head. I can't be the captain and have to carry everything myself every time, right? That would be a big loss of points, don't you think, Zoro? Zoro rolled his eyes. I'm the future world's #1 swordsman, so I'm working as a porter. Did I say anything? Nami happily walked between the two of them, patted Luffy's shoulder on the left, and patted Zoro's shoulder on the right. Good job. Don't push your luck, Zoro said with a dark face. Luffy couldn't help but smile as he looked at Nami, who was skipping forward with her long legs and her hands behind her back. But when they walked into the town, they found that there was no one in the town. The doors of the houses on both sides were either open or closed, but there were some signs of robbery. Seeing this scene, Luffy couldn't help but frown. He didn't need to think about it to know that this was definitely the work of the buggy pirates. It can be said that this is the true face of pirates in this world, right? However, they didn't see any blood or casualties along the way. Perhaps, just like the original work in Wong Luffy's memory, the townspeople on the island had already run to the other side of the island for refuge. After entering the town, seeing some houses in the town destroyed by cannons, Nami's smile gradually disappeared, and then her face became cold. Look, these are real pirates. They are different from you who go on adventures with dreams. What you will encounter in the future will only be more cruel. Are you sure you still want to be a pirate? Hearing Nami's words, Luffy turned his head and looked at her in surprise. Are you talking to me? Why don't you talk to me? Zoro kicked Luffy in the butt. I'm a pirate hunter, okay. Zoro, you are a pirate now. Luffy turned around and corrected him. I told you not to call me Zoro, you. Zoro jumped up and cursed. Nami ignored them with a dark face. Luffy would naturally not miss the opportunity to fool a young girl, and immediately approached and said, Nami, just tell your brother, which pirates in the East China Sea do you dislike? Luffy Gigi will definitely help you smash their heads. As for the source of my power, you know, I am a rubber man who ate the emotion fruit. The more the opposite likes me and the more stimulation they give me, the stronger my power will be. Zoro said with a dark face, what kind of fruit are you? Can you please explain it clearly at once? The rubber emoji of the human fruit. Why has it changed again? Oh, it's almost the same, that's what I mean anyway. Nami didn't pay attention to Luffy's unreliable introduction to the fruit. After all, she had seen the real effect. Thinking of this, her big eyes lit up immediately, and she turned her head to look at Luffy. If I kiss you, can you beat that clown buggy away right away? It depends on where you kiss. Luffy's mouth curled up. Nami protected the little lotus that had just shown its tip and glared at Luffy. You pervert, where do you want me to kiss you? Wow, no way. I was just talking, do you really want to kiss me? I haven't even had my first kiss yet, don't try to take advantage of me. Luffy immediately jumped away a few steps, as if he was afraid that Nami would molest him, and then sighed. Boys still have to protect themselves when they are outside. Monkey D. Luffy, you. Nami's eyes were blazing, and she chased after Luffy. My name is Wong Luffy. You are kidding. I heard you say your name is Monkey D. Luffy. I'm not. I didn't. Stop talking nonsense. Hey. Stop right there. I don't say hi. Standing there, Zoro watched the two men running away, and couldn't help but sigh. It seems that we really need to recruit some people as soon as possible. Otherwise, we won't be able to live like this. After sighing, Zoro quickened his pace and chased after them. When they arrived at the central street of the town, he saw Luffy and Nami standing in front of a pet shop. Luffy held the cloth bag on his back with one hand and pressed his straw hat with the other. At the same time, he stretched out his foot to block the huge claws of a big green lion that was slapping the barking puppy in front of the pet shop. Bang! A wave of air rippled between the collision of Luffy and the big lion's paws. Nami quickly bent down, picked up the puppy, stepped back a few steps, and then looked at Luffy and said, Hey, Luffy, no question. Nami stopped talking halfway through her words. Bang! This green lion, which she considered a ferocious beast, was kicked more than 10 meters away by Luffy's casual kick. After plowing a ditch on the street, it lay on the ground motionless. Licky. The change happened too quickly. The trainer with white bear ears who had been standing aside and ready to laugh at Luffy suddenly screamed and rushed to his pet. Licky, are you okay? Licky, who are you? After questioning Luffy, he seemed to have thought of something and immediately added. Excuse me, I am the vice captain of the Buggy Pirates, the animal trainer Mochi. Ah, hello. I am Luffy, the Pirate King. Luffy introduced himself as usual. Nani? One Piece. Mochi's eyes almost fell to the ground, and then he curled his lips and said. Stop lying. Actually, your name is Wong Luffy, right? It doesn't matter. You are the vice captain of the Buggy Pirates, right? Luffy glanced at him. Take me to Buggy the Clown. What do you want from our captain? Mochi looked at Luffy with caution. He knew that although this boy looked thin, he was definitely very strong. Licky couldn't even withstand his casual kick. Who do I need you to care about? Luffy glared at him. Oh, that's right. Mochi nodded subconsciously, and after a moment of silence, he cursed. What a ghost. You were looking for our captain, so of course I have to take care of it. Boy, I advise you not to make trouble. Our captain is Buggy, the clown who ate the devil fruit. What on earth do you want to see our captain for? Luffy thought for a moment and said. Our beautiful female navigator doesn't like Buggy the Clown, so I'm going to beat up his people, steal his money, and beat up his minions. Nani? Are you a demon? Mochi's eyes widened in shock. Nami pointed at a row of houses that had been destroyed in the distance. Scum like you should be punished by the devil. Zoro came over at this time, flicked his finger and the Kazuo Ikimonji came out of the sheath with a swoosh, and he said coldly. Hey Luffy, why are you nagging him? Why not just cut off his arms and legs and let him show you the way? Wow. You guys are all devils. Wait. Who are you? Pirate Hunter Zoro. You are a pirate too. Mochi was really shocked this time. If he had never heard of this boy named Wong Luffy and the girl named Nami, he could still discuss it, but the green algae-headed guy in front of him was the notorious pirate hunter Zoro in the East China Sea. It was rumored that even Captain Monka of the Shield's town was defeated by him. How could such a person come here? It seems that it is really necessary to report to Captain Buggy. Thinking of this, Mochi suddenly turned over and climbed onto the back of the big lion that was still lying on the ground and roared. Ricky, run. We have to get rid of them. Roar. The green lion, who had just been lying on the ground motionless, jumped up and ran forward, raising a huge cloud of dust. Seeing Luffy and the other two standing there in a daze, Mochi turned around and laughed triumphantly at them while making faces. Ha 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 ha, 3 idiots, do you really think I will take you to find the captain? King Luffy, right. Don't run away if you dare. Pirate Hunter Zoro, right. Wait for death. Just 3 people dare to challenge our Buggy Pirates. Today I will show you how powerful our Buggy Pirates are. Nani? Mochi, who was still laughing triumphantly and making faces, suddenly saw an arm that stretched for dozens of meters from behind him and appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. Before he could react, he was pulled off the lion's back by the collar, and then he was thrown back to his original position in a breath. Seeing the 3 people surrounding him, Mochi turned back to look at Licky who had already run away, and clasped his hands together and laughed at Luffy and the other 3. Bang bang bang. After a round of punching and kicking, Mochi, with a bruised face, obediently led the way. 10 minutes later, they arrived in front of the largest house in the town, and then Mochi smiled at Luffy and the other 2 with a flattering smile. Look, you 3, I mean what I say, don't I? I brought you here, didn't I? I always keep my word. Lord Sauron, look. Oh, I almost forgot. Zoro took back the Wado Ikimonji that was on Mochi's neck, and then looked at Luffy. Luffy, that clown Buggy seems to be on the roof, should we go up there? Luffy shook his head and smiled evilly. He is just an emperor at best. Do I, the Pirate King Luffy, have to go up to him in person? Just wait and see, I have a way to make him come down on his own initiative. What method? Nami asked in surprise. Zoro and Mochi also looked at him in confusion. The latter knew his own Captain Buggy's nature very well. If they could fight shoulder to shoulder, he would never fight one-on-one according to the rules of the martial arts world. But the next moment, Mochi's eyes bulged out again. Luffy took a deep breath and yelled. Hey, big red-nose Buggy. I heard that you are the long-lost son of Red Hair Shanks. I am going to the Grand Line. Do you want me to bring a message or a letter to your father? After Luffy yelled, the whole area fell completely silent, and even the wind seemed very noisy. Mochi kept swallowing his saliva. Luffy showed a sly smile. Big red nose, and the son of Shanks, all the elements are complete. Just like this, can you tolerate it? King G. Which is yelling here. I'm going to tear you apart. Guys, follow me. The next moment, a shrill roar came from the roof of the 4-story building, and then a figure in a cloak flew down from the roof towards Luffy and the others. Obviously, Buggy couldn't stand it anymore. He was ready to go shoulder to shoulder. Oh. Go ahead, brothers. How dare someone challenge our Buggy pirates? They are simply courting death. Watch me blow them up. As Buggy the Clown roared, the pirates standing on the rooftop who were watching the excitement rushed down from the stairs on both sides. Buggy rushed towards Luffy with 8 throwing knives in each of his hands, but he was stunned when he saw the straw hat on Luffy's head, but he still shouted. You little brat. Were you the one who provoked me just now? Buggy's upper body was suspended in the air about 7 or 8 meters in front of Luffy, looking down at him, while his 2 legs were slowly following behind his younger brother. He squeezed down the stairs. Hey, Luffy, he can actually fly. Zoro was also shocked. Didn't you say his fruit was the split fruit? Why can the split fruit fly? Luffy casually pointed at Buggy's 2 missing feet and said. Didn't you see that his feet disappeared? Zoro was stunned for a moment. So what? It's normal for him to be able to fly without using his feet. Luffy rubbed his forehead. This is a feature of the 4 split fruit, which is that he can split his body and fly within a certain area. But his feet must be on the ground so that his body can fly. Zoro suddenly realized. Oh, so he hit his feet. Luffy wanted to continue talking, but Buggy was already pointing at Luffy angrily and yelling. You too. How dare you ignore the great Captain Buggy? Guys, beat them to death for me. Oh. Nami behind them saw dozens of Buggy's crew members rushing towards them with various weapons. She pointed at Buggy and said sarcastically. I thought the Buggy pirates were so great. It turns out they just like to bully the weak with their numbers. They have no moral principles at all. What kind of Buggy pirates are they? I think they should be called the shameless pirates. Buggy was so angry that his mouth twisted, and he pointed at Nami and yelled. You little brat. How dare you slander the great Captain Buggy? I'm going to make you suffer. As he said that, Buggy swung his arm violently and launched the 4 throwing knives in his hand towards Nami. Ding ding ding. But before the flying knives reached Nami, Zoro and Dao Yuanzi were unsheathed, and they quickly drew a few blade lights in the air and directly deflected the 4 daggers. Nami, who was standing 5 meters away, crossed her arms and nodded with satisfaction. Well done, Solon. Hey. Are you talking to the person who saved you like this? Zoro's face darkened and he glared at Nami. Buggy was stunned for a moment, then sneered. I know you are strong, pirate hunter Zoro, but your sword is ineffective against me. Remember this. My name is Roronoa Zoro. Don't force me to kill you, Buggy the Clown. Zoro cursed loudly, while moving his body to one side in a fighting stance. Ha ha ha, chop me to death. Did I hear you right? You want to chop the great Captain Buggy to death. Then come and try, you ignorant brat. The clown Buggy raised his head and laughed. Swish, swish, swish. But Zoro had no intention of talking back at him, and directly drew 3 knives. One knife was bitten in his mouth, and the other 2 knives were light carrying on his back. Try it. Then don't wait until you die to regret it. Buggy had no intention of dodging, and just looked at Zoro with a mocking smile. Zoro's eyes suddenly became sharp, and he was nearly 10 meters away in an instant. Quote. Hunting. As Zoro's last blow fell, the 3 swords chopped Buggy, who was suspended in the air, into several pieces in almost an instant. Zoro, who was 2 meters behind Buggy, glanced at the corpse that was chopped into several pieces and said coldly. So, I didn't say. Before Zoro finished speaking, the clown Buggy pirate crew members who rushed over gradually showed smiles that he couldn't understand. Nami was covering her mouth when she saw Buggy being chopped into several pieces, but when she saw Buggy's body falling and his head still floating in the air with a weird smile, she immediately reacted. Zoro. Watch out. He's not dead yet. Ha ha ha, it's too late. Buggy the clown laughed, and manipulated his other hand holding 4 throwing knives to float silently to the blind spot on the right side of Zoro's sight, and then stabbed into Zoro's waist fiercely. This stab was real, and if Zoro didn't die, he would lose his combat effectiveness instantly. Although Zoro had remembered Luffy's warning, the silent sneak attack method of the split fruit was simply not something he could detect since he hadn't learned the observation haki. This is why the devil fruit was called a bug in the early stage. What? Just when Buggy's sword was approaching, Zoro still felt it a little, but it was too late, his body could not keep up with the reaction. Nami was already a little afraid to look at it. Whoosh! Shave. But in the next moment, Luffy, who was still more than 10 meters away from Buggy, suddenly stood between him and Zoro in the blink of an eye, and then raised his hand and easily grabbed Buggy's wrist, which was not strong enough to hold the knife. What? How could you? How is it possible? Baki, who was floating in the air a few meters away, was obviously confused by Luffy's move, and looked at Luffy who appeared more than 10 meters away in an instant with disbelief. Zoro was also obviously confused by Luffy's sudden move. At this time, Luffy stood between the two of them, holding the straw hat on his head with one hand and holding Buggy's knife-holding wrist with the other hand. He raised his eyes slightly under the shadow of the straw hat and looked at the clown Buggy in the air, revealing a smile. Hey, Buggy. A surprise attack is not what a captain does. You. Buggy, the clown with only his head floating in the air, had a cold sweat on his forehead. He had a hunch that he might have hit a wall this time. Zoro also turned his head at this time. He couldn't even feel how Luffy appeared behind him. This speed. Luffy, is this the new move you mentioned? Did you learn it from the book I got from Monka? Zoro's eyes lit up. Want to learn? I'll teach you. Luffy grinned. Nami, who was far away, was also slightly surprised to see Luffy suddenly appearing on the opposite side. After hearing the conversation between Zoro and Luffy, she realized it belatedly. But she was still relieved. As long as nothing happened, it would be fine. Good. Zoro's eyes lit up, and he glanced at Buggy's body, which was slowly gathering together, and his expression gradually became solemn. Hey Luffy, is it true that the swordsman can't hit this guy? Luffy shrugged. In theory, this fruit is a natural counter to your swordsman. But there are other ways, after all, I don't use a sword. Zoro said in a deep voice. Even if I know haki, it won't work. Luffy tilted his head and thought for a moment. Well, probably not. This is the power of the devil fruit, how about it? If you want, I will find you a devil fruit that is both suitable for you and powerful in the future. Zoro was stunned for a moment, he did not expect Luffy to say this. You know, the devil fruit is a treasure of the sea, any one of them is at least hundreds of millions of Baileys, or even something that is priceless. But he said he would help him find one. Although Zoro was not interested in devil fruits, he was still very touched that Luffy had this intention, and then smiled and shook his head. We are only 3 people now. You can't swim, Nami has 0 combat power, if I eat the devil fruit again, she won't be able to save us if we fall into the water one day. Hey, do you have any manners? What do you mean by, oh combat power? Nami came over and patted Zoro on the shoulder and said righteously. You two are as strong as monsters, why do I need combat power? My strongest skill is navigation. Humph. Luffy laughed and raised his hand to press on Nami's head. Ah, yes, yes. When there are more of us, I will give you a natural devil fruit. That way, no one will be able to hurt you easily. Tisk, who cares? Nami shook her head, seeing that there was no way he shook off Luffy's hand and gave up struggling, but the corners of his mouth curled up. Buggy's face darkened and he raised his hand and said. I'm still here, you little brat. You're actually dating in front of me, right? Guys, come on, kill this couple. Oh 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 oh. The thugs who were watching on the side finally rushed up. Luffy, I will take care of these minions, Buggy, you deal with them. Zoro bit the Wado Ikimonji in his mouth again. But the next moment, a figure holding a knife on a unicycle suddenly blocked in front of Zoro and sneered. Roronoa Zoro, your opponent is me. I am the chief of staff of the Buggy Pirates, Kabaji. Then, he attacked without hesitation. Acrobatics Kamikaze 100 Euro Theater. 7 or 8 small spinning tops were instantly thrown from his hands towards Zoro. In the play, Zoro was injured, so he was delayed for a long time by this guy. But now Zoro is fine, and it is a situation where there are many people against few people. How can he be polite to this Kabaji? Three swords style. Oni. Immediately, Zoro crossed his two swords and stared at Cabbage. The moment he was stared at, Cabbage froze, as if he was stared at by a ghost. He was horrified and wanted to retreat, but it was too late. Kill. Swish, swish, swish. Phew. It was only a moment of crossing, and a huge cross wound was formed from Kabaji's chest to his abdomen, and blood spurted out. Immediately, Kabaji screamed and fell to the ground. Those crew members of Buggy the Clown who were halfway through the charge did not expect that their chief of staff could not even take a single move from this pirate hunter. This was too scary, right? How could we possibly defeat him? Now it was a matter of running, or running. However, Zoro did not give them a chance to think. He rushed into the crowd with a knife and chopped randomly. At this moment, Zoro was like Brother Haonan who had chopped from south to north, and like Luo Tianong who held the 8-sided Han sword and challenged a whole gang of others. No one could stop him. No matter how timid Buggy the Clown was, he was already furious when he saw his subordinates being chopped down one by one in front of him. Especially this person's companion was a guy wearing a straw hat. He was sure that this kid wearing a straw hat must have a connection with that Shanks. Straw Hat Boy. What do you want to do? I, Buggy the Clown, have never offended you, have I? Or did that Shanks ask you to come to me for trouble? At this time, Buggy was floating in the air, with a gloomy face, holding 8 throwing knives in his hands and looking down at Luffy. He really had the momentum of an emperor. Nami nervously grabbed the corner of Luffy's clothes. But Luffy suddenly smiled and said, "Ha ha ha, you didn't offend me. But we are all pirates. When pirates meet, it's normal for them to rob and kill each other, right? Besides, I don't want to rob civilians, so isn't robbing you the fastest and easiest way to get it?" At this point, Luffy paused, then pressed his straw hat with one hand, and stared at Buggy under the shadow of the straw hat. Of course, the most important thing is to see the true level of the future 5th Emperor. Thanks for watching.